In less than a decade, the cost of large-scale solar power has fallen by more than 90%. However, the pace of adoption of solar is very slow. Why is this? Many of us might assume that the reason so much energy still comes from gas and coal power plants is simple economics. Those fuels are cheaper. But though it was once true, that assumption has actually been obliterated by a recent decline in solar costs over the past decade. When it comes to the cost of energy from new power plants, solar is now the cheapest source, costing less than gas, coal, or nuclear. Solar has cheapened at a blistering pace. Just 10 years ago, it was the most expensive option for building a new energy development. Since then, that cost has dropped by 90%. Harnessing the power of the sun used to be so expensive that it was only used for satellites. The initial demand for satellites fueled a virtuous cycle. The more panels that were produced for satellites, the more their price declined, and the more they were adopted for other niche purposes. As the cost further declined due to technology improvements and the rise of economies of scale, solar was able to eventually debut as a viable general-purpose energy source. Since 1976, each doubling of solar capacity has led to a 20.2% average decline in the price of solar panels. Fossil fuels, in comparison, can't keep up with this pace. That's because fossil power plants have to buy mined fuels to operate. In coal plants, supplying the coal accounts for about 40% of total expenses. Sunshine and wind are free, which allows the costs of tapping into their power to decline sharply as technology improves and the industry grows. Despite a massive drop in costs, renewables haven't replaced fossil fuels at the rate you might expect. That's because the investments, policies, and very infrastructure of the energy industry as a whole are very much skewed in favor of fossil fuels. While it is cheaper to build renewables when considering a new plant, that metric doesn't necessarily apply to running a fossil fuel plant that already exists. Sometimes, the regulatory structure of utilities actually makes it more profitable to keep a coal or natural gas plant running. This is especially true for the state-regulated monopolies that supply power in about half of U.S. states. Market forces and monopolies aside, there are few other, more tangible barriers to a widespread renewable rollout. Sun and wind aren't consistent throughout the day or the year, and sometimes the best places for power don't actually have many people living there. The aging American electrical grid doesn't currently have the ability to distribute power from renewables over long distances. These challenges of intermittency and geography are not insurmountable. Batteries and water can store energy, and better transmission systems can be built. But the solutions will require massive investments to develop and build the needed infrastructure.